Michael L. Brown holds a Ph.D. in Near Eastern Languages and Literatures from New York University and is the author of 20 books, as well as numerous scholarly articles. He has served as a visiting or adjunct professor at 7 seminaries and has spoken throughout the United States and in 25 other nations. He is the host of the daily nationally syndicated talk radio show, The Line of Fire. Dr. Brown is also founder and president of the Fire School of Ministry and is director of the Coalition of Conscience based in Charlotte, North Carolina. He is the author of A Queer Thing Happened in America. Dr. Michael Brown, welcome to the Global Freedom Report.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. I understand you and your wife, Nancy, celebrated your 35th anniversary earlier this year. Congratulations. It is.
Thanks. In fact, the same day A Queer Thing Happened to America came out was our 35th wedding anniversary, so it was kind of a sweet irony.
It just happened that way? You didn't plan it that way?
Oh, no. The book had been 6 years in the making, and wow. We were not expecting it out quite that day. So it was a pleasant surprise to see them shift to the office.
Oh, that's very cool. I'll tell you something. It is really and truly gratifying to meet people who believe in commitment, who remain together 35 years despite the obstacles and challenges that arise. Somehow, young people seem to have lost sight of the value of commitment, of honoring their vows. Do you agree with my view? And if so, how do we resurrect such values in our youth?
Well, there's no question that there's been a terrible breakdown in the family. Although my book focuses on issues having to do with gay activism, heterosexual families have had real deterioration. We haven't taken vows seriously. We haven't taken commitment seriously. Basically, there's a fundamental notion in our generation that it's all about me. Even the message that's preached in some of our Christian churches is basically how God wants you to have a bigger and better life. So it's all about me, and therefore, if the relationship is not working for me, it's not giving me what I want, I'll walk out. There's no way you can have a marriage with an attitude like that or any type of lasting positive commitment. So somehow we have to recover the deeper value that as we work together, as we serve each other, as we meet one another's needs, then you really find fulfillment and satisfaction. And the other thing is, if you make a promise, you got to stick to it. And marriage vows are not the kind of thing that you make one day and toss out the next. And, we got a lot of the celebrity marriages and divorces within a matter of hours. That colors a lot of our culture, colors a lot of our thinking. So many kids in America grow up in broken homes today. So the parents, the older generation and the younger generation getting married, we've got to take our vows seriously, our commitment seriously, and honor the other person. Put the other person first. If we can have a culture of honor, we can really start to change things.
And not to bypass it because you shot through it so quickly, but you made a point that I don't even know if you realized you made, which is that we have come culturally, at least our youth have, to equate better with bigger. You said that, they say God wants you to have a bigger and better life. God does want you to have a better life, but I question whether that necessarily means bigger or more. And I think that's
and what does better mean? Does it mean just more material possessions?
Exactly, that's my point.
Gadget?
Exactly.
Yeah, does it mean more Facebook friends and tweets? Yeah, it's the American mentality at its downside. There's a lot of good in the American mentality. The bad side is that bigger is better. And we have that mentality across our culture. And when we equate life like that the more I can have and the more I can do and the more I'm known, that the better my life is, we're really misled when we have that as a fundamental conception. And it's really quite superficial on top of it.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and I think that's really the point. If we could change that, if our youth would understand that the term better life means something different than having money and position and power and convenience, okay, that's not necessarily what better is, then I think we've taken a step along the correct path for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, my life has been better through faith in God. I'm raised in a Jewish home, but got very heavily into drugs in the late 60s, early 70s, part of the whole counterculture movement. I was playing drums in a rock band. I was 16 years old, growing my hair long, which for me was a sign of rebellion, going to see Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin in concert, wanting to be just like them. I started getting high at 14, started shooting heroin at 15, and was a complete rebel, leading a destructive life and thinking I was very cool, and then had a radical conversion experience through faith in Jesus when I was 71. So, in 71. I'm not 71.
Yes. Yes.
When I was 16 years old. Yeah, and that was a long time ago. 71 when I was 16 years old, so it's almost 40 years ago now. So my story is literally from LSD to PhD. So I can agree, absolutely, we can have a better life. But I'll tell you what, when I look at the world's richest people or the most famous celebrities or the who's who, I don't envy them.
Is there really a homosexual political agenda in the United States? Or are those who make these claims simply labeling a body of people who are living a homosexual lifestyle?
Oh, there's no question that there's a homosexual political agenda. The only mystery is that people deny it. Now, to be sure, your average person that identifies as homosexual doesn't have a political agenda. Their primary agenda is just let me live my life and don't bother me. But there's no question that you have massive amounts of money pouring into gay activist organizations like the Human Rights Campaign and Lambda Legal and Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network and Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. They are lobbying Congress. They are active in our schools. They're the ones behind pushing for the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military. They're the ones behind pushing for same-sex marriage in state after state after state. In their mind, it's a matter of equality and tolerance. I'm just curious as to why not admit there's an agenda. There was a civil rights agenda. There's a conservative political agenda, liberal political agenda. Why not admit it? So the opening chapter of my book, A Queer Thing Happened to America, is called The Stealth Agenda. I've got quote after quote after quote from homosexual leaders saying there's no agenda. It's a figment of the imagination of the right wing, and they're trying to make us look bad and have page after page after page from their own lips. Here's the agenda. Here's the plan. Here's the change we want to bring about. And basically, if you sum it up, those who came out of the closet 40 years ago fighting for what they believe is equality and tolerance now want to put into the closet all those that oppose. And if you say, morally I don't agree with homosexual practice, or religiously I don't agree with homosexual practice, or, I really believe marriage is between a man and a woman, and, I don't want my kids in kindergarten being taught about two moms and two dads, you are labeled now a hate-filled, intolerant bigot. That's how far things have come. Of course there's an agenda.
Okay. Now, I don't want to belabor the point, but I really want to underline it. You just said yourself that homosexual groups will come out and say, but there is no agenda. This is just your figment of your imagination. How is it that we know, capital K-N-O-W, how can we be certain that it's just not our own political paranoia?
Oh, well, number one, in their more candid moments, they'll sometimes admit things openly. For example, Matt Foreman, who is the former executive director of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, which is one of the oldest such organizations in America, 2006, he said this, you want to know the state of our movement on November 10th, 2006. We are strong, unbowed, unbeaten, vibrant, energized, and ready to kick some butt. The agenda and vision that we must proudly articulate is that, yes, indeed, we intend to change society. This was at their National Creating Change Conference. So they'll say it forthrightly in certain circles. And then, I have quotes in my book from the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation where they say, don't use the term civil rights, homosexual agenda or gay agenda because that makes us look bad. Use other terms instead. And then the last thing is, what constitutes an agenda? You have a certain set of goals that you're actively fighting for. You look at the websites of any of these organizations. You look at their stated goals. You look at their stated purposes. You look at the changes that have happened in America in the last 20, 30, 40 years. That's an agenda. If that's not an agenda, you're on the phone with Elvis Presley.
Speaking of that, let's go to the phones. Kathy is calling in from California. Kathy, welcome to the show. You're on the air with yours truly, Brent Johnson, and Dr. Professor Michael L. Brown.
Hi there, Brent. Hi, Dr. Brown. I just wanted to call in and tell you that absolutely, yes, there is an agenda. Now, I am not homophobic, but my former husband, the father of our son, died in 1983 of AIDS. He was recruited. Someone approached him. And to me, even though I'm Christian and I go by Christian principles, this is wrong within nature itself. Nowhere in nature do we see a male entity approaching another male entity for sexual purposes. It is abnormal. It does happen, but that doesn't mean it is normal. And the gay agenda is an attempt, in my opinion, to normalize something that is abnormal. If you want to live that way, that's fine, but don't push it on me, don't push it on my child, and don't push it on my society. Thank
Thank you, Kathy. Appreciate the call. And by the way, just as a point of order, just like I don't allow the D word on this show, we tend not to use the G word. The word gay actually means happy, cheerful, of good cheer. Okay, we use the word homosexual. It's more syllables, but it's also a better description. What do you think of what Kathy just said?
First, I do understand the mentality behind that. I have colleagues that don't want to give in on the semantic battle. I simply use it sometimes as I'm reaching out in conversation with those that would identify as such, but I'm happy to stay with your vocabulary. You know, a couple of comments. There are homosexual activists that will say, look, in nature, you have same-sex behavior. Well, in nature, you also have mating where the female eats the male after the mating kills them, or where the parents eat their young. So we can't make deductions based on that. And then a lot of same-sex behavior in nature is not so much sexual, but signs of dominance and things like that. I actually deal with that in a footnote in my book because it comes out. But the fact is the pattern of nature, reproduction, if you just say, even if someone says, look, this is who I've always been, I am homosexual, I didn't choose to be like this, just ask yourself a question. Did God design a man to be with a man and a woman to be with a woman? No, there is a fundamental design. That's how we procreate. That's how we reproduce for the next generation. That's how we tie a child to a mother and father. And men are not women and women are not men. You know the books, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, whatever those books are. There's a complementarity that when you join a man and woman together, they each have an effect on the other that doesn't happen when you join two men or two women together. Your caller is absolutely right fundamentally that there is a desire to recruit, not in the sense that homosexual activists are trying to seduce kids in school because they're all pedophiles. Rather, they want to indoctrinate little kids that homosexuality is fine, that there's no moral distinction between homosexuality and heterosexuality, that a family with two moms or two dads is the exact equivalent of a family with a mom and a dad, and that perhaps you might even be trapped in the wrong body. Perhaps you might even be transgender, and Johnny is really Jane, and Johnny should start coming to school in first grade as Jane wearing a dress. Yes, that stuff is in the books. I have a whole chapter dealing with children's education and A Queer Thing Happened to America. So in that sense, there is recruiting by way of indoctrinating into homosexual ideology from preschool right up to our college campuses.
Well, and I think she's also speaking from the perspective that I guess it would be secondhand because it didn't happen to her. It happened to her husband. But I would imagine from what she said that she means that she pretty much knows that it happened to her husband, that he at some point or another told her about it. So when she says he was recruited, I think she's being literal about that. The other thing is that I tend to shy. I don't go out and say homosexuals are necessarily abnormal. What I do, because I wouldn't presuppose that I have the wisdom to know what normal is, but I do think it is reasonable to say homosexuality is unnatural because you're talking about in nature, there is sexuality is male to female. Yes, I know some animals eat their young and all that, but that's not the point. Reproduction is consistent in nature. It is male and female, female and male. Therefore, male or female would, it seem to me, be unnatural, and that seems to be a reasonable statement.
Yeah, totally reasonable statement. You may have a homosexual friend, neighbor, colleague, family member that's a very sweet, kind person, great worker, friendly, reliable, and yet homosexual behavior is unnatural in the very way that you described. And look, any homosexual couple wanting to adopt a kid or, quote, have a kid, hear these big headlines and magazine stories and in our grocery stores, Elton John and his partner have a kid. No, they can't. You must have a missing ingredient that two men and two women don't have, because every child is ultimately the product of a male and female some way, somehow. So that, again, is just the pattern of nature. And, back to something we talked about at the beginning of the show in terms of it's all about me. We have in our society so separated sexual relations from procreation that sex is just recreational, sex is just fun, you can have a one-night stand, if it feels good, do it, as opposed to sex as being part of the expression of marriage and having a role also in reproduction. as we get away from that, just anything goes. So we see the breakdown first in the heterosexual homes, and then in the homosexual community, it just kind of fills that void. And it is absolutely going in the wrong direction. It's all on the heels of the sexual revolution from the 60s, which has produced about 6 times as many kids born out of wedlock as we had before, and that's certainly not a positive equation.
Okay, let's accept, for the sake of discussion, that there is a homosexual agenda. Now, if there is an agenda, okay, you would think that somebody is behind it. Some individual or some group of individuals have at some point got together over a round table or a board meeting or whatever and said, we need to establish an agenda. Who's behind the homosexual agenda?
Well, just like any political party, you have movers and shakers, or any revolutionary movement, you have movers and shakers. So certain things happened spontaneously, the late 60s, Stonewall riots. Then you had groups like National Gay, originally just the National Gay Task Force, and became National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. They began to come up as leaders. They began to strategize. And then you had, if you want to jump ahead into the late 80s, there was what some call a war room conference. Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsden documented in their book After the Ball how America will conquer its fear and hatred of gays in the 80s. Or in the 90s, excuse me. This book comes out in the late 80s, and it talks about a war room conference with some of the major homosexual activist leaders in America coming together, strategizing how they have to impact the media, how they have to impact the schools, how they have to impact the culture. Kirk and Madsden lay it out clearly in their book, which represents a lot of the strategies that these activists had. And now more and more organizations have risen up. The Human Rights Campaign, which especially focuses on political lobbying. The Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network, GLSEN, which especially focuses on school education. Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, GLAAD, they focus on the media. Lambda Legal, they focus on court cases. And then what's happened is corporate America, the great majority of Fortune 500 companies now have rules in place against, quote, sexual discrimination based on sexual orientation. So that it has become pragmatic in the business world, for whatever reason, kind of lean over backwards to the homosexual lobby and to cater to various demands. And with that, you've got these various groups all moving in the same direction, because remember, they have a common goal.
Well, and
it's not a myth.
That is my next question. What is the ultimate objective of the homosexual agenda?
The complete acceptance, approval of homosexual practice, bisexual practice, transgenderism in our society. That there are special protections for homosexuality, bisexuality, and transgenderism, that it is completely normalized, and not just accepted, not just tolerated, but celebrated, applauded, admired, embraced, and that all opposition to it, be it moral, be it legal, will be completely marginalized and ultimately removed. That would be it in a nutshell.
Well, okay. Now, that's fair. Now, you indicated that this started kind of back with the 60s and, the sexual revolution. And that makes a lot of sense because the American culture was probably more vulnerable to such influences back then. But back in that time frame, that's when everybody questioned everything. Everyone questioned authority, and that was the culture. So how is it that people today who are not homosexual, who are not interested in spending time with homosexuals, have somehow been taught to keep their views to themselves? What happened to speaking out freely in America?
Well, a number of things have happened. There's been the deadening effect on the media, which has made us insensitive to lots of these things. There's hardly a sitcom that'll go by, or TV drama. So many of the movies where the themes will be homosexual friendly. Film critic Michael Medved said that a Martian gathering evidence about life in America would think that there were far more homosexuals than there were evangelical Christians. So you've got the media bashing of the conservative Christian or moral viewpoint, the exalting and glorifying of the homosexual viewpoint. You've had many people being somewhat passive about this because, hey, it's not their life. They're doing other things. And you've got homosexual activists giving themselves to this day and night. You also have the fact that the tables have been turned so that now those who take issue with homosexual practice are viewed as hate-filled, bigoted, tolerant. We're called Nazis, jihadists, Hitlers. And because of that onslaught, many people back away. I don't want to seem intolerant. I don't want to seem bigoted. You've also had a society that's departed from a lot of biblical moral values on top of it. So in this tremendous void, and with the pressures being what they are, a lot of people aren't willing to take a stand. Look, I've written 20 books. I've had no problem getting books published. When I went to write A Queer Thing Happened to America, no major publisher would touch it.
Yeah, I heard you read into stuff. Tell us.
Yeah, I had one conservative publisher tell me directly in correspondence, I'll be an eager reader of your book, but I can't publish it. It'll be too costly. Bookstores will boycott my other books. I will lose authors over this. No library will carry your book. People have said the economics of doing this are bleak. Another insider said that if someone would fund it, he'd put it out. He said, but otherwise it's like burning my money in the fireplace.
How did you overcome all of that?
We put it out ourselves because we know the message is right. We formed our own publishing house called Equal Time Books. We put it out, and in fact, it's doing well. Folks can order it on Amazon.com. It has been several times #1 gay and lesbian nonfiction title on Amazon. That's how it got listed. So it's getting to a wide range of readers. And I've got my daily radio show where I can promote it. But people know there's a problem. People they're loving, they're tolerant, they're caring, but they don't agree with homosexual practice. They don't agree with redefining marriage. They don't agree with giving special rights to a man who believes he's a woman that wants to use the ladies' room in a restaurant. And they're indignant. They hear what's happening to kids in schools. But we've had unbelievable opposition to this. I had the local homosexual newspaper publish an editorial blasting me, and they put my head on the body of a Muslim terrorist with an AK-47. You get crazy stuff like that happening, but that encourages me that we're on the right track. The hate that I see is coming against our side, not from our side. The intolerance is coming against us. In fact, the speaking tour that we're doing with the book is called the Campaign for Religious Tolerance and Intellectual Diversity, because wherever we turn, people don't want to talk about this. We've had media outlets saying this is too hot. We can't talk about it. We've had others tell us there's boycotts. If we take a stand for this, if we promote your book, we will be boycotted. And if you think a few years ago, Dr. Laura, famous radio host, she's going to go on TV, but because she took issue with homosexual practice, homosexual activists launched a boycott against her. It cost her $33 million in advertising, and she was not able to go on television. So people are just running scared, unfortunately, and somebody's got to stand and draw the line in the sand.
Well, and also what you say again points out, I pointed out on the show all the time, that we have to take our society and completely redo our value systems. As long as money is the driving force, the love of money is the root of all evil. As long as money is the deciding factor for just about everything that happens, then this kind of influence can take hold. You know, if principles guide our actions, then we'll sacrifice money for principle, and then this type of influence does not get a foothold in our culture.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If we bow down to the world's values in that sense, if we're going to be concerned about income in terms of doing what's right, if we're going to be concerned about popularity in terms of doing what's right, we've already lost the battle. Dr. Martin Luther King said that a man dies when he refuses to stand up for that which is right. And that's what happens. We lose our moral courage. We lose our real values. We become slaves to human opinion. We become slaves to how much money is in the bank. And of course, we have to be responsible. Everyone has to pay bills and feed their families. But you're 100% right. I couldn't agree more. And I felt it is incumbent on me to do what's right, with nothing but love for those I differ with, but to sound an alarm, to bring a wake-up call, to awaken the conscience of the nation, and to say, look at what's happening, look at where we're going. There's a whole chapter on queer theology that's just agonizing to read through, how the Bible gets completely twisted, reinterpreted, and the role of the media, and what's happening on our college campuses, and threats to religious freedoms. I mean, it's unbelievable. Threats to religious freedoms coming our way because of this. Kai Feldblum, who's a lesbian woman law professor at Georgetown University and now on President Obama's Equal Opportunities Commission, she's on record as saying when there's a conflict between sexual liberties and religious liberties, I cannot see a single instance where religious liberties win. And this woman is now on our President's Equal Opportunities Commission.
Yeah, well,
I had to sound the alarm.
What about the First Amendment? You know, that raises a question. There are a lot of people who would like to be able to make a statement around this issue. But if everyone is afraid of listening to any concerns regarding this topic, then how do we go about making our voices heard?
Yeah, well, I think people are still willing to listen. They're afraid to speak, or they don't know what to say. So it's incumbent on us on a grassroots level, through whatever media outlets we have, whatever contacts we have, to educate people, because there is a critical mass on the other side. There's so many parents who are deeply upset with what's happening to kids in school. There's so many families, like the first caller, that are now being torn up through homosexuality, bisexuality. I get letters from husbands, from wives, about spouses leaving them after 25, 30 years of marriage, which ultimately comes down to, again, it's all about me. People in the college campuses, parents in particular, contacting us. Professors who are being threatened with loss of job for doing what's right. Churches who are potentially losing their ability to speak out. So I think that the heat has been turned up, that even though the frog has been in boiling water, the heat got turned up so quickly, he's realizing something's wrong. He's ready to jump out of the pot. So what we have to do is inform, educate, and then equip. If folks go to aqueerthing.com, the website with my book, there's a long section called Get Involved, page after page after page, where for every area that we talk about in the book, we give practical steps for what people can do. And if they think homosexual population of America is 3% or less, look at the extraordinary change they've brought about by standing up for what they feel is right and by being out and proud about certain things that others would say are perverse and wrong. Think about that. If we could just be out and proud for what is right and beautiful and wholesome, we could still change our culture.
Yeah, excellent. That's fantastic. My guest has been Michael L. Brown, doctor, professor, and author of A Queer Thing Happened in America. He's the host of the nationally syndicated talk show The Line of Fire. For more information on the book, go to Amazon.com or www.aqueerthings.com. You can also go to www.askdrbrown. That's drbrown.org. Thanks so much for being with us, Michael Brown.
Oh, it's been a joy to be with you. Keep up the good work.